Hello, I am Dr. Steve Johnson, and today the topic for this session is resolving a client's conflicting demands that cause stuckness or ambivalence in psychotherapy. It's not infrequent when a therapist encounters a client who feels stuck within psychotherapy or experiences ambivalence, complicating the kind of collaborative efforts to establish goals within the therapy. Today I want to look at one possible resolution of this based upon a real case analysis. And the case begins when a young man in his mid-20s presents for REBT therapy, but up front in the initial session, in the intake, expressed ambivalence about being in therapy. Well, initial exploration helped the therapist to identify an issue experienced frequently by the client. When the client is in public with a love interest or a member of the family or friends, he is hypervigilant about assessing his environment for potential threats either to himself or his companions. He stated that it is really important for him to make the environment safe for everyone involved. On the other hand, he wants very much to be in the present moment, he said, so that he can fully enjoy his family and friends. The client shared that as a child, he was physically abused by his father, and as a result determined that he would exercise a lot so that he could be strong enough and protect himself and others. He expressed that he has no doubts that he can now protect everyone and sees this as his duty, something that he absolutely must do. Throughout that first session, he seemingly sought validation from the therapist that his goal to protect people is a good and warranted goal or value. When the therapist wanted to establish some concrete psychotherapeutic goals, the client became agitated and stated that he didn't want to change his goal to help others and to keep them safe. And he wanted the therapist to affirm that no other goal should even be worked on. When the client was asked what he wanted to achieve in therapy, the client was vague and came back to the rightness or correctness of his goal to keep everyone safe. The therapist became really perplexed about what to do next. In fact, the therapist became stuck and then brought this up in peer supervision with someone that he talks to regularly about his sessions. Eventually, after this collaboration with the peer supervisor, the therapist shifted his approach within the therapy and pointed out to the client that it seemed that the client had two values that seemed very important to him. One, to enjoy the moments he is in public with his family and friends, and the other, to keep the environment safe for everyone involved in that public setting. And the client affirmed that that was an accurate observation. The therapist tested his hypothesis that the client and his felt stuckness and ambivalence in therapy may be due to conflicting, demanding beliefs held by the client. One belief being, I must enjoy the presence of family and friends in public. And two, I must make the environment safe for family and friends. And his hypervigilance associated with that second demand about keeping the environment safe for everyone impeded him living out the first demand to enjoy the presence of family and friends in public. Well, the client affirmed that this is indeed a real bind, at which time the therapist decided to slow down the session and to spend more time developing a more complete REBT conceptualization of emotion. And let's get into that. The client's identified emotion was anxiety, which was negatively impacting his quality of life and contributed actually to his social isolation and stress that he reported in this second session. The client's identified inferences were that the public settings are filled with threats to the lives of self and others, and their very life and comfort. The identified unhelpful or irrational beliefs as part of this conceptualization of emotion were about 7 of these beliefs. 1, I must fully enjoy being with family and friends in public. 2, I must keep myself and my significant others safe. 3, my environment must be safe. 4, it would be horrible if I or a significant other were to be harmed in public. 5, I can't stand not assessing the environment for potential or possible threats. 6, if I or a significant other were to be hurt or attacked in public, that would show that I am utterly weak. And lastly, number 7, most strangers are horrible people, not to be trusted, and must be kept away from me and my significant others. And then, of course, in the conceptualization of emotions in REBT, we look at the behavioral potential. And the client, and the therapist rather, indeed did that. And the behavioral potential here is that the client often avoids public settings to be safe from harm to self and significant others. He's distracted in public and doesn't fully enjoy being in the presence of his significant others. He overinvests time and money to exercise physically to make himself strong, but it results in an inordinate amount of time refraining from doing other very beneficial things such as studying, developing other interests, and enlarging his circle of friends. The result is that he has diminished pleasure and created a very small world for himself, one that is, from his perspective, filled with potential threat. This conceptualization, which is typically conducted within REBT, actually helped the therapist in several ways to develop a potential treatment plan with the client. And some of the information obtained was as follows. 1, from the conceptualization, the therapist learned the meaning the client attributes to the nature of his environment, that it is filled with threat, and this diminishes him perceiving the fullness of the opportunities present in the environment in the presence of some possible or actual threats. This meaning is then generalized to many environmental settings and situations, whether within the personal, interpersonal, social, educational, professional, and even spiritual world. He said spiritually that he was wondering why God doesn't make the world safe and had some major doubts about his faith. 2, the client's irrational beliefs could be used in cognitive restructuring to help the client develop more flexible, realistic beliefs with better social outcomes in diverse settings. And 3, the identification of the client's behavioral pattern of avoidance can be addressed via behavioral interventions to replace the global avoidance with reasonable risk-taking in the world to broaden and improve his enjoyment within the world. In addition, the therapist did something that is essential to therapy, REBT therapy, namely, identify the client's values. And 2 of those were protecting himself and significant others, tremendously valuable to him, and enjoying the presence of other people. It's really important in REBT that we spend some time assessing those values because they will be very helpful in forming goals. The therapist clearly helped the client see that the therapy would in no way try to change the client's values, but to decrease the stress he experiences when these values were elevated to the level of demands that he placed upon himself. The initial plan, developed collaboratively with the therapist and the client, included the following. 1, exploring the strengths of the client's values, how important they were to the client. 2, cognitive restructuring of the unhelpful, irrational beliefs via the disputation of the beliefs while affirming the values of the client. 3, exploring the possibility of more flexible, realistic, and hope-supporting meaning the client attributes to his environment. From an environment that is overwhelmingly threat-filled to one that does contain potential or actual threats, we don't want to minimize that, but also has the opportunities for safe enjoyment with others. 4, help the client move toward unconditional self-acceptance, even if he isn't fully capable of keeping everyone safe totally. In other words, accept his limitations and fallibility without demanding he be a superhuman, which diminishes his pleasure in life. 5, since his faith was important to him, and if the client wanted to integrate it into the therapy, there could be a discussion about how evil and goodness can both be in the world and how we can accept our limitations and that the world can be enjoyable. 6, some exposure therapy techniques might be employed to have the client act against his tendency toward avoidance and then incrementally take reasonable risks into the world and in various settings. The client reported that what helped the most was that once he saw that he had elevated his good values up to demands, he was less able to enjoy himself and those he loved, which in the end he realized was far more important to him than keeping everyone safe. Creating a safe environment without enjoying others would not be the sort of environment he wanted to create. And even if he did create such an environment, it might not be the one that was desired by those he loved. He reported that the therapy had been greatly beneficial for him to overcome his stuckness and ambivalence, and the process helped the therapist overcome his stuckness in the therapy and actually enjoy doing the therapy with the client. I hope you found this helpful and that in the future, if you get stuck in a session, check to see if there are some conflicting demands that the client is placing upon herself or himself. Thank you and have a great day.